Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amita Rari. Coming up in today's newscast. The White House today offering praise for Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments coming in response to President Biden. Meantime, he's a free man. Roman Zadorov acquitted in Tair Rada's murder case after 17 years. And finally, FIFA strips Indonesia of U20 World Cup after calls for banning the Israeli team. After the flap caused by U.S. President Joe Biden's unusual comments yesterday criticizing Prime Minister Netanyahu, the White House now appears to be changing its tone. Now the Biden administration is saying there was a lot to like in Netanyahu's calls for compromise. ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
Call it tough love or a spat between best friends. Either way, just a day after remarks yesterday by President Biden, the White House today offered praise for Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments that came in response to Biden.
How do we ensure that the judiciary remains independent and that we balance the need to strengthen the executive and the legislative and at the same time protect individual rights? I think that balance can be achieved. And that's why I've promoted a pause that now enables both the opposition and the coalition to sit down and try to achieve a broad national consensus to achieve both goals. And I believe this is possible. We're now engaged in exactly this conversation.
After Biden had weighed in on an internal Israeli matter, the White House acknowledged that Israel is a sovereign state and sovereign states make sovereign decisions.
Look, Israel's a democracy and a sovereign state, of course, and sovereign states make sovereign decisions. Our whole point about this and our whole concern is, and the president has said this himself, that we'd like to see decisions made there with a good friend like Israel, and Israel is a good friend that are in keeping with a consensus and that can be done with the broadest possible base of public support.
At the same time as it offered praise for Netanyahu and compromise, the White House still underlined President Biden's message that agreement was needed as soon as possible.
We obviously urge Israeli leaders to come up with a compromise as soon as possible, and the president's comments yesterday about walking away from it are perfectly consistent with finding a compromise that again preserves checks and balances in Israel.
In the past days, Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly said that he would find compromise with the political opposition over judicial reform.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will serve as the keynote speaker at an event in Jerusalem on April 27, his second trip to Israel as a governor. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former U.S. President Donald Trump's main opponent in the Republican primaries, will arrive in Israel on Independence Day for a conference of the Jerusalem Museum of Tolerance and the Jerusalem Post. DeSantis is expected to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and tour Judea and Samaria. A meeting between Netanyahu and DeSantis could possibly upset former President Donald Trump, also intending to run in the Republican primaries. The governor of Florida will be the keynote speaker at the celebratory event held on the occasion of 75 years of independence for the State of Israel, with the participation of 400 guests from Israel and abroad, including about 120 Jewish American philanthropists. The Celebrating the Face of Israel conference seeks to deal with the constant tensions in Israel, to teach about history of the country, and introduce the audience to the change makers who embrace tolerance and acceptance. DeSantis will talk about the importance of the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, especially in difficult times. So we know the news in Israel is very fast-paced. We want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone. U.S.-Israel relations always being a hot topic, especially in recent weeks. And joining us now is founder and president of the Jerusalem-Washington Center, Gidon Israel. Gidon, it seems that the White House is pretty much toning down its criticism of Israel to allow time for a compromise. Do you think Washington got the message that Israel is a sovereign country?
Well, I think we have to back up a little bit and understand the broader issue. The Biden administration and the current Israeli government, they don't agree on Iran. They don't agree on the Palestinian issue. They don't agree on the direction of the Abraham Accords. They don't agree on Israel's settlement activity in Judea and Samaria. The personnel who are dealing with Middle East issues within the Biden administration are a lot of the same people who were in the Obama administration, and some even worse. The Biden administration doesn't like the current makeup of Israel's government, as they are boycotting ministers from the Religious Zionist Party and Jewish Strength Party. So, with all this disagreement, if that's the approach of the Biden administration, of course, there's going to be flare-ups and crises and so forth. And I think that's what we're seeing happening right now. It's important to note that the Biden administration's criticism of the judicial reforms and them talking about the need for a broad compromise. I mean, we saw in the Biden administration's first 2 years a Senate that was 50-50 and a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives of only 4 or 5 seats, and nonetheless, Biden pushed through everything he wanted to push through. So the fact that he's talking about a broad compromise is not exactly the way he's acting at home. But I think the criticism of the judicial reforms going on in Israel goes to the fact that the Biden administration understands that the current Supreme Court in Israel is kind of a check on an Israeli right-wing government. It can hamstring an Israeli right-wing government, and it has the last word. So for the Biden administration, it's very comfortable that should be how things remain, especially as Israel has a complete right-wing government as it had in years.
Gidon, and it's interesting to know, have any leading Republicans in Congress or Senate been speaking up against the pressure Biden has been placing Netanyahu under?
So Ted Cruz tweeted out that it was utterly disgraceful, the fact that the Biden administration was intervening in an Israeli internal issue. Presidential candidate Nikki Haley also criticized Washington, and I think one of the reasons that the Biden administration wants to tone down the criticism is because the more it pushes Israel into a corner, the more Republicans will come out and criticize the way the Biden administration is handling this issue. And if it pushes Israel even further into a corner, then we're going to see some Democrats also come out and criticize what the Biden administration is doing.
Now, I'd like to change direction a little bit. Florida governor and likely Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is coming to Israel next month. He's a governor with no international experience. What do we know about his view towards Israel?
As friendly as they get. He is what he supports. Israel supports Judea and Samaria, supports strong relations with Israel. And I think the most important thing is he sees Israel as a strategic ally, not as a problem that needs to be solved in terms of peace with the Palestinians and so forth. He sees Israel as a strategic ally on Iran. The linchpin of U.S. support in the Middle East. His first trip abroad as governor, he brought his whole cabinet to Israel. He signed a joint agreement between I think Florida Atlantic University and the Ariel. So passed strong BDS laws. He was a strong supporter of Israel in Congress, outspoken, a leader on Israel issues, and he's been a leader also as governor among governors in the United States on Israel issues.
Just in a sentence, Netanyahu at the White House, when will that happen?
I don't know. Could maybe another few months. maybe more. Maybe there will suddenly be a reason why he needs to be invited. No one knows.
We'll keep waiting. Gidon Israel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.